Welcome back. We're with Kevin Annett, who is the Field Secretary of the International Common Law Court of Justice. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Alfred.
Well, there's quite a lot of news from the trial of Pope Francis in Brussels. There's news of Irish babies being ritually murdered and a number of new names coming up. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I'll just summarize what we posted this week. It's up at itccs.org if people want to read it, although there have been a few new reports over the last 24 hours. Main report has to do with this story that's all over the world news, including, in the main corporate media, the nearly 800 babies whose remains were found in a cistern at what's called the St. Mary's Home for Mothers and Babies in Tuam. It's pronounced Chom, actually, in Irish. Tuam, Tuam, Ireland. Now, the official story is that they don't know how these children died. There's no crime scene at all, but they plan an investigation. Now, this is like an official in-house investigation where the church that did it and the government get together and decide what they're going to release about it. However, sources inside the Garda, which is the national police force in Ireland, have told us that it's the case that their forensic people have already gone in there and done some examinations. On the basis of that, there was a statement from one of these cops that said that, I believe the quote was, these children weren't simply killed, they were slaughtered, because they bear all the marks of what they understand to be ritual sacrifice. For example, the bodies are dismembered and decapitated. There's bits of bodies, they're not entire skeletons. And this was common among the remains that they examined. So obviously there was strong evidence that there were ritual killings of babies going on, which fits the pattern of this Ninth Circle cult that operates within the Roman Catholic Church and which has been documented and described already in the evidence before the Common Law Court in Brussels. In the case of Jorge Bergoglio, Pope Francis, and others who are now being tried for these crimes and the trafficking of children. So this is very important evidence, and it flies in the face of the whole way the issue is being presented to the world, and that is, these unfortunate children died somehow, and the Catholic Church is talking about setting up a memorial site. The usual kind of controlled spin on the whole issue. But clearly, there's evidence that these children were ritually killed. Second aspect of that has to do with another eyewitness who's come forward in Holland. This is a former a public servant. I won't say in what capacity, because we're protecting this witness. But I spoke to this person on Skype over the last week, and this woman described in detail the operation of child sacrifice cults in Holland and Belgium. Now, she's the fourth one to come forward with the same kind of story, involving, in this case, the younger brother of the present King of Holland. His name's King Willem. He had a younger brother called Friso, and this man, according to this witness, was involved in continual killing of children and teenagers. Now, the way this happened was, this person is tied into the witness was a former member of what's called the Octopus. That's the name she had for it. It's a crime syndicate in the Netherlands and Belgium that controls the whole drug trade and is tied in closely with the government and the royal family. Now, according to this witness, the way it worked is the criminal syndicate gets children out of juvenile detention centers all over the Netherlands and Belgium. The detention centers are told that these children are going to work at the Royal Palace, Queen Beatrix's home, and these children are taken off in work parties, and then they're never seen again. There are inside court officials who cover for the disappearances by saying, no, these children have been moved elsewhere. But in fact, what happens is these children and teenagers are taken out and used not only in ritual killings, but in hunting parties, human hunting parties, where they're let loose naked in the woods after being drugged and taken out there. and they're hunted down and shot and killed. Now, this eyewitness says she witnessed in the year 1996, 2000, and 2004 these same kind of rituals going on. These in this one incident she described from 2004, two young boys and a girl were let loose. These were young juvenile offenders, 14 to 16 years old. They were let loose in the woods. They were hunted down and killed and shot. And then the young boys had their penises cut off, and the hunters were holding up these penises as trophies, hunting trophies. She also describes being sent or going to a palace near there in the Dutch countryside, where these penises were actually displayed on the wall like hunting trophies. Now, she said people who were involved in this one incident included the present Prime Minister of Holland. His name is Mark Rutte, R-U-T-T-E. George Soros, the multi-billionaire, who's a friend of this Prince Friso. Her name is Mabel Wiss-Smith. And Prince Friso was there taking active part in it. Former judges, the head of the military, a guy called Dick Berlin, and the hunting party itself in Holland and Belgium were being guarded by soldiers. And in fact, one of these former members of the military, the Belgian military, is also willing to come forward now and confirm this. But the interesting thing is Friso himself died last year. There was a so-called skiing accident in Switzerland. He was brought back to a hospital, he was recovering, and then he died quickly in the hospital. So we think, as with the case with William Coombs and others, this was just a killing in the hospital to get rid of somebody who may have talked, because apparently he was killed soon before Laurent Louis, the Belgian member of parliament, was about to name him and others as part of the insiders in the government-run and royal family-connected child trafficking networks in Belgium. If you remember, he named members of the government. In fact, several of the same members that this woman has named. And we think that that's why Friso himself was killed, and why Laurent Louis is now facing charges and possible imprisonment for naming all this. So, one final point on this new witness from Holland. She said in one incident she saw Friso talking to somebody who, unlike the rest of them, were not speaking Flemish or French, and he was referred to as the Irishman. He was a cardinal or a bishop, a fairly high prelate in the Catholic Church, and he was called the Irishman. So that's an interesting link as well with Ireland.
Right. So this begins to connect not only the Catholic Church, but also the monarchies, other monarchies, the Dutch monarchy and the Belgian monarchy. Does the tribunal have any plans to name them as defendants in a future action in Brussels?
Well, that's really up to the prosecutor's office. I can't, speak
Yeah.
for them or anything. I'm just kind of an advisor to them. I'm feeding them a lot of this information and evidence. But it's clear that the initial case having to do with the three defendants, Pope Francis, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, and the head of the Jesuits, Adolfo Pachon, who, by the way, has already announced his upcoming resignation after being indicted in our case, all three of those were connected to this Ninth Circle ritual cult and the child trafficking. Clearly the case has evolved much beyond that now, and there's going to have to be spin-off cases, if justice is to be served, around all this evidence that's pouring in now. So I would imagine, I couldn't imagine it not happening, considering all of this, the solid eyewitnesses, the documentation, and now this whole possible forensic evidence coming out of Ireland of children, babies, newborn babies who themselves appear to be involved in some kind of ritual slaying.
Now, on your last trip to Brussels, you were able to meet with the former Belgian MP Laurent Louis, and he was brought up on charges in a kangaroo court, a fraudulent proceeding, at which sentencing is going to occur only 4 days from this interview. Today's the 13th of June, and on the 17th of June, these were kangaroo proceedings in Brussels, in which he was sentenced to a 20 months suspended sentence and €50,000 fine for having in Parliament, under his parliamentary protection, stated that the Belgian Prime Minister, who has since resigned, was a pedophile. And in fact, now all of this evidence has been unearthed, at least at a prima facie level, by the tribunal. And you're going to be in Brussels in just about a week's time. Do you plan to bring this evidence, this prima facie evidence? Obviously it's going to the court, but at least two former MP Louis, and to the courts there, and to the media there, so that they can see that there's been significant attempt to cover all of this up.
Yeah, definitely. The thing about Laurent Louis to understand is that he's been targeted and he's a public figure, but there's many more people involved in this movement. He's part of something called Debout les Belges, Rise Belgians. And talking to some of his people, they want to expand this now. They don't want to be simply a political party anymore. They want to create a whole movement, a social movement in Belgium and the Netherlands to confront this wider issue of the criminality of state and the royal family, and obviously the church as well. So even if Laurent is put away, what we find is it tends to feed this uprising and this movement. And in fact, an example of that is I've had increasing numbers of emails and calls from Europe, people saying, when are you coming over? I want to volunteer for sheriff training. We need common law courts going. These are from areas where traditionally there is no common law, and there's no understanding of that. Our number of volunteers is well over 300 now, people who want to do this common law sheriff training. And so it'll be an impetus to this whole thing. Every time they come down on one of us, as we saw with David Compan, Vivian Cunningham, people who've been put away in mental institutes for naming these royal family members as criminals, that just feeds our movement. As a matter of fact, now in Coventry, on June 21st, they're having a big conference of over 200 people. Whereas before, a few months ago, Alfred, they had maybe 15, 20 people. Now they're able to have 200 delegates at a conference because people are coming out of the woodwork now. This has really captivated a lot of the interest and imagination of people, to confront the criminality of the state and the churches and to say enough's enough. So I see this as blossoming. And just on that, leading into, kind of the next issue I wanted to talk about, the common law sheriff training. We understood early on that a lot of people had a lot of heart and commitment, but not a lot of understanding of the common law. So we didn't want to put up barriers for people. We wanted anyone interested in stopping these criminals to begin to get active. So the court put out the idea, and the prosecutor's office actually suggested to me when I was meeting to them, that we set up these community, what they call direct action units. So people who want to intervene and stop these satanic rituals, stop the murder and the rape of children, should get involved and take action to do that, because we have every right under common law to do that. When there's children being harmed and the police are standing by and letting it happen, we have that obligation as citizens to perform citizens' arrest to do that. So we have information now that these satanic rituals connected to the Ninth Circle will be holding their next covens, the major ones, at the two churches in particular, Pro Cathedral in Dublin and Marie Reine de Monde Cathedral in Montreal, on August 15th and possibly August 25th, which is the new moon. That's usually when these rituals are held. There will be groups going into those cathedrals, seeking out those rituals and shutting them down, and arresting those responsible, charging them with murder, and arraigning them before the court. The common law courts have been formed in Dublin and Montreal, in dozens of places now all over the world. So I want to say to people, we can take direct action now to save the lives of these innocent children, and we have that obligation. If it requires deputizing police to do it as well, we're going to be doing that, but we're going to have these trained common law sheriffs. We have a core of professionals who are helping us in this training. And if you want to be involved in that process, write to the main office at itccscentral@gmail.com. These actions will be going on starting August 15th.
Right. Now, you're also going to be carrying out enforcement actions the last week of June, as I understand it, in the UK and in Rome. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, that was the one I'm going over to be part of.
Yeah.
Um, by July 1st, I'm going to be back in Europe, and we decided, and the original plan was for have Laurent Louis, myself, and a whole team go into England and down to Rome and enforce these arrest warrants, enforce the stand down orders against agents of the Vatican and the Crown of England, which are now in legal force. I mean, this was a way to add more push behind those stand down orders. Basically, that these officers, the police officers, the judges, all of them are serving criminal bodies, and they need to stand down from their office and not be part of that criminal conspiracy. And that was the original plan. Now, whether or not Laurent Louis can do that with us still, it doesn't really matter because we're going ahead anywhere. We're going to be an organized delegation going to London and Rome, like I mentioned, and that's going to be filmed in real time. With a television crew in England that have agreed to be there with us. And so that's going to add more fuel to the fire, if you like. It's going to be confronting these institutions directly, and we'll be holding press conferences and actions right at Buckingham Palace, right at other key locations, including at these places where the Ninth Circle are continuing to hold their hideous sacrifice of children on those dates and at other times.
Will you be making a stop in Ireland at Tuam during this trip?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there will be an event in Ireland separately, being convened by the several dozen volunteers we have in Ireland, announcing a common law inquiry into Tuam, the murders at Tuam, at the St. Mary's Home. We're going to be demanding that the Gardaí either help us or stand aside. Otherwise, they will be accused and charged with obstructing justice and with colluding in a criminal act on behalf of the Catholic Church and the government of Ireland, which is clearly helping to cover up this evidence. It's a crime scene, and they're stopping any inquiry into it. So that's a separate thing that'll be going on in Ireland with the convening of the Irish Common Law Court.
Right. Now, in the midst of all this, there is also the convening of a constitutional convention here in Canada for the Republic of Canada. And that itself is an enormous historic undertaking. So could you tell us about all of that and the history of it and where that is going?
Well, that's a particularly exciting aspect, not just because I'm a Canadian talking about this, but it's the next logical step from all of this. When we say that the Crown of England, the head of state of Canada, is a convicted felon, and not only for that reason, but because of a whole history of fraud and criminality and genocide committed by the Crown and the Vatican and its various affiliated churches, like the Church of England and the United Church of Canada. For all those reasons, Canada doesn't exist. It's dissolved, in effect, as a lawful political and legal entity. It has to be reconstituted on a lawful basis. And that's not only to follow international law and what's right and just, but also to give sanction and legitimacy to the common law courts that are forming across Canada. There needs to be a constitutional framework. When we say we're setting up common law courts, it isn't just an action of citizens. It also has to have a constitutional basis for it. Just like in America, in the Fifth and Sixth and Seventh Amendments to the Constitution, it ensures every citizen the right to a speedy common law public trial, jury trial. That's a constitutional right. We need the same thing in Canada, but we can't do it under the auspices of a criminal body like the Crown of England. So in effect, what's happened, Alfred, is in Winnipeg, there has been a group working for several months to convene a constitutional convention. This will be announced September 1st. It'll be actually convened during October, the last week in October, hopefully to announce the actual creation of the Republic of Canada sometime around the end of October 2014. There's already groups in nearly every province electing delegates, bringing, there's been a a draft constitutional and Declaration of Independence that's already out being looked at and amended and debated all across the country. And if people want to get a copy of that and be part of this very historic process, you can write to Republic of Kanata, that's Kanata, Republic of Kanata at gmail.com. And it's actually pronounced Ganata. It's actually a Six Nations word where the word Canada comes from. The Six Nations Confederacy had that word. It means our village. And, philosophically, it's in line with what the common law really is about. It's about villages or communities of people as sovereign men and women deciding their own destiny, not nations, not corporate entities like Canada, and these churches that historically have been committing crime in the name of us. This is a time now, a great time to put all that aside, to cleanse ourselves of that whole genocidal legacy and start again. This is the whole purpose, not only to create Kanata, but to say to the police, to the judges, to the soldiers of Canada, to the members of Parliament, stand down. You now can be part of, this new republic, which stands on common law and lawful government, not what we have now. So it's very exciting, and again, I urge people to be part of this process if they're in Canada.
Now, there exists a very lengthy and complete declaration and draft constitution for the Republic. Is that true?
That's right. It's been a first draft has gone out from the group in Winnipeg, and it's been sent out to people. Now we have that. Like I say, just write to the Republic of Kanata at gmail.com. They'll send you a copy. But we are also going to have it up this week at our other normal sites, itccs.org in particular. So people can start looking at that and seeing the connection between, not simply the indictment and prosecution of these criminals and these guilty verdicts that have come down, but what do you do with that verdict? You can enforce it as a community at a direct level, but we also need a political expression of that. And what's really a spiritual expression of it as well, because we're saying as people, we don't have to be part of this criminal history anymore in these institutions. Here is an alternative that people are creating from the ground up. And that's what's really embodied in this two things, the Declaration of Independence, but also the draft constitution for the Republic.
What do you see as the genocide, in fact, the ongoing genocide against the Indigenous people of Canada and the Republic of Kanata? Is that sort of a prime mover of this, or?
Very much. As a matter of fact, one of our members, Joshua Lamens, is in Ottawa today, and he's taken his staff with him as an Indigenous person. And he says, in the name of the Federated Republic, he's planting that staff there and reclaiming that area for the Republic. Now, we're going to have that up. That's going to be broadcast on YouTube today when Joshua does that. He said Federated Republic because the Indigenous nations have never relinquished their sovereignty on the land. And the settlers from Europe, my ancestors, and the people now, the so-called white Canadians and others who have come here, need to be part of a federation where they're in a state of equality with the Indigenous nations. So, in effect, the idea for Kanata is that it's not another imposition over Native people. It's, as the Truro Wampum Treaty said originally, we are side by side as equals, as brothers, not as great white mother over the children, but as brothers and sisters sharing the land together. So the idea of a federated republic is that all the nations would have the right to opt out or be part of it. One of in the draft constitution, the idea was that there would be a Congress of delegates elected by everybody, but alongside a Council of Indigenous Nations elected only by the Native people. They'd have veto rights over legislation having to do with any Native person and that kind of thing. So it would be a way of working out what it would be like to actually live as equal nations side by side. And in that sense, it's a very exciting development, and we invite Indigenous people everywhere in Canada to be part of that process.
Now, as amazing as it would seem, there was an archbishop in a major city, a Catholic archbishop, who stated that, we didn't know that sex with a child was against the law. Do you think that was a, an act,
No.
or what what exactly do you think that was?
I think it's a very honest description of the mentality within the Roman Catholic Church. The fact that it is not a crime under Catholic canon law to rape a child. It's considered a sin, but that's not a crime under the law. They don't consider it a criminal act to rape a child. So when you're raised in that culture, you literally believe it's not wrong. And when Robert Carlson, who was the Archbishop, answering a question to lawyers, he was an Archbishop in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota, where as far back as 1980, he was protecting child rapists according to the Catholic policy to do that. Crimen Solicitanus said children who are raped are to be silenced. The offender is to be protected and moved around so he can do it again. Clearly, it's not a crime. Now, it might be mind-boggling to somebody to think, how can a mature human being think that it isn't a criminal act, that it isn't abhorrent? The point is, that's the mentality we're dealing with. And it's very interesting, Alfred. I see the mask slipping more and more these days. It's almost like, with the head of the Jesuits stepping down and Bergoglio himself, Pope Francis, talking about, the possibility of him resigning, and now archbishops actually saying, no, it's not a crime. I mean, the mask of this beast has slipped, and you'd have to be a complete ignoramus not to see what you're dealing with. And I think that's the times we're living in. It's a time where all things are being revealed. I think it says somewhere in the book of Revelation, those things which have been hidden shall all be revealed. And we're living in that time where that exposure is undeniable now. Nothing can be hidden anymore, and we have to act on that knowledge. We can't play dumb anymore and pretend that we're dealing with, the occasional child raping priest. We're dealing with institutional crime and child murder, and if we allow that institution to continue in its present form, then we are equally guilty in the death and rape of those children.
Right. So this seems like it's the pace of activity is increasing and accelerating.
Yeah.
How long do you feel that you will be in Europe and working with the tribunal there?
Well, as long as it takes, as I always say.
Yeah.
I'm going to be there during July. There's a lot of I'm supposed to be in 4 different countries, and especially in Ireland and going into England, where there's people crying out for this. Our best response after America has been coming from England. There's a huge groundswell in the common law movement there. So I'll be going in there. I'll be spending July in Europe, then through the United States, where, like I say, there's over 150 volunteers working actively. We have so many supporters and people doing common law sheriff training in America now that we are hoping to open a American office for the common law movement in Minneapolis, right in the Midwest. And we have a lot of support to be doing that, and it's strategically very close to Winnipeg, where a lot of the the Republic of Kanata movement is as well. So that's going to be a real focus for me during the summer and fall as well, and of course getting the Republic off the ground here in Canada. So all of that is, I'm telling you, the administrative work here is overwhelming. Here and in Brussels, we're not keeping up with just the number of people now wanting to get involved and trained. So what I say to people, and if you're listening and watching this, don't wait for a central office. Use the evidence, the training manual, your own conscience and gut feelings about this will be your best guide. Take action. Don't wait for us. Take the action, and that's the best way to build this movement. Also, from a point of view of security, we can't have things operating out of a central office. That's how things have been sabotaged and destroyed in the past. We need this as a decentralized grassroots movement. So I say to everybody, don't wait, take that action. And again, write to itccscentral@gmail.com, Republic of Kanata@gmail.com for the Republic movement here in Canada, and also our main website, itccs.org.
Now, and people can find the training manual again where?
At itccs.org. It's in the process of revision. We've had a lot of good input from the sheriffs in America who are giving us good advice on the ground of how to put this into action. So go to itccs.org. That's the best resource. And I just say, folks, carry it on. There's a great opening happening right now that I haven't seen ever to this level of involvement and awareness shaking up the whole planet. So I say now is the time to strike where the iron is hot, and let's all keep going and do this.
Well, Kevin, thank you very much for taking time to be with us for this update, and we look forward to your coming again as events develop.
I look forward to talking to you over the next few weeks from Europe, where there'll
good.
be a lot to share. I hope we can do a live broadcast from Europe.
Oh, excellent.
Probably Brussels, or even in England, maybe outside Buckingham Palace. You
Oh,
never
good.
know.
Yeah,
maybe inside the Vatican. You never know. We might occupy
That'd
the
be great.
Vatican. That'd be great. But this is all for the children and for the
Yeah.
ones that are going to die if we don't take action. So we'll carry it on. Thank you all.
Good enough then. Thank you.